All right. Let's start seated. Blanket and a ball handy. Just a nice comfy seat. And ah, find our way into a breath. Let our spine get tall. Maybe let the eyes close here. Slow things down a bit. There's a new king who had just taken over his reign. And you'd come to power with this idea of unity, connection, and a commitment to one another. Think about how you can slow down the rate of respiration. How you can use both the inhale and exhale side of the respiration to align and relax. Think about your shoulder stack, your hip balance. How that hip balance impacts the shoulder stack. Let's give ourselves just 30 more seconds here. Really thinking about how the little tweaks, little adjustments impact the body. Last breath here. Big full inhale. Full complete exhale. At the end of the exhale, so with the lungs empty, tuck the chin down to the sternum. And then as you inhale, pull the breath in and let the shoulder girdle get wide. Let the palms roll up towards the ceiling or sky. And then the next exhale cycle, see if there's even more space to relax the chin, to elongate into the flexion of the cervical spine. And then utilize your next inhale breath to lift your chin back to neutral. See if you've kept that width, if there's more capacity to breathe throughout the throat. And as you exhale, keeping the hands face up, round the back, like you're trying to push the lumbar towards the back of your room or back of your mat. Tuck the chin once again. And then inhale, coming back to neutral, pulling the shoulder girdle wide and letting the sternum kind of lead the shape. And let's just reverse into exhale. And reverse to that inhale. And so we're not going full extension of the cervical spine, but we are moving the lumbar and thoracic in this cat-cow articulation. Trying to keep the shoulders relatively static, I would say. Aside from that maybe desire to expand as the sternum comes forward. So there's a little bit of that anterior pull. Without the big lift of the chin, though, we should stay relatively static. Maybe one more time in each direction. I really like how this movement stays kind of at the thoracic joint, or apex is at the thoracic joint. Eventually, we'll come back to neutral. And let's just let your arms fall to what feels natural. So palms down is natural for you, totally fine. And then we're just going to exhale over towards the left. I can't remember if I have my screen mirroring or not. So either ignore me or follow me, whatever feels appropriate. And then back to neutral. And we'll do the same thing over to the right. And back to neutral. And see if the top of the shoulder girdle can just relax down without that compression in the spine. So shoulders relax, spine stays naturally tall. And let's take an inhale and lift the chin. Think about maintaining the static position of the thoracic spine down, and exhale, bring the chin down to the sternum. Inhale, lift the chin. Exhale, tuck the chin. So really static in the torso. Completely focused. You can continue with your breath here. Completely focused on this cervical spine articulation in isolation. One more time in each direction. And eventually we'll come back to neutral. And let's transition to staff. As we get into staff, let's just make sure we have our props handy so that they'll be easily accessible when we do make our way to our back. And then once you get that verticality of the spine, think about that nice 90-degree-ish angle of the torso. Let's take ourselves into a forward fold. Remember that you can bend the knees. See if you can utilize the space we've articulated into the spine to get some depth into our fold. And from that depth, some expansion into the spinal column itself. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. Check back in on the duration of your respiration. See what tweaks and adjustments can be made. Thinking about those tweaks and adjustments so that they are offering maximum impact for your time this morning. And one last big inhale breath. With the exhale, think about completely and fully relaxing into your fold capacity. And then we'll bring ourselves back up towards a vertical spine alignment. Take your right hand behind you, palm facing away from you, back of the hand to the small of the back. And then think about the core engagement required to get that verticality. Let's take our left hand straight up towards the ceiling. And with an exhale, take your left hand towards the medial edge of your right foot. So towards that big toe edge. That can be the calf, the ankle, that could be the hamstring, but on that inner edge of your right leg. And then think about drawing the right shoulder back and using that to help increase the depth. So there's a little subtle rotation. And this will not be an exceptionally long fold here. This is more about how your shoulder girdle is impacting your capacity to go forward. And then we'll draw ourselves back up towards vertical. Take the right hand and extend it towards the ceiling, and your left hand to the small of the back. Palm away from you, back of the hand towards the body. And take that right hand towards the medial edge, big toe edge of your left foot. And then think about that draw back and how the drawing of the left shoulder back allows for more depth into the fold. Also changes where in the posterior chain we are receiving the benefit, or maybe impact is a better word. May not feel like benefit in the moment, but our body will appreciate it later. And when you feel balanced left to right, we'll come back to vertical and just extend both arms up and overhead. And then release the hands behind your head, interlacing the hands like you're cupping the back of the head, and just push the elbows out towards the edges of your room. So thinking about verticality of the spine and then elbows wide. Think about relaxing into the hips. Note what's going on in the pelvic bowl. Are you getting that lateral edge pressure or that medial edge pressure? And try to balance that out. As we pull slack out of the system, the body wants to respond. Sacrum is generally a sticky point, so we probably get a response around the hip girdle. And then just relax. Let your shoulders relax. And let's head straight onto our back. So releasing down and letting the musculature around and underneath into that subscapular musculature respond to a pretty unique start here. Give yourself just maybe 20 more seconds to kind of find your way back to neutral. Palm down any musculature that may be speaking out, letting you know that it's been asked to do something that it might not normally be asked to do. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll inhale and bring both of our knees into a bent position. Let's take our blanket or towel and from shelf fold, hot dog fold that. So we end up with a prop like, well, not like that, like this. And then we're going to place that on the right side of our body. So next to our right hip. Our left hand is going to point up toward 90-degree bend at the elbow, fingertips up towards the ceiling, and then internally rotate. So palm comes down towards the floor. If you're lucky, lucky is the wrong word. If you don't feel like you get all the way to the floor, you can continue to move the elbow down. You can also use the ball as a secondary prop to give you kind of a little bit of height there. If you get down and it's super easy, you may want to tuck that hand underneath the lumbar. And then we're going to allow the right leg to fall out wide so that we have an external rotation of the right hip and an internal rotation of the left shoulder. You can extend the left leg if that feels appropriate. You also don't need the prop. You may not need the prop on the right hip. So if you feel like removing that blanket is valuable for that external rotation, feel free. At the same time, if the blanket feels like it's the right place, keep that support there. Right hand falls by your side, palm up. So we have an external rotation of the right hip, external rotation of the right shoulder, neutral placement of the left hip, and an internal rotation of the left shoulder. And breathe your way into this space. And so as this king came to power, he was received with gratitude, loyalty. And he spoke of those things to the people of the kingdom. Gratitude, loyalty. It's important. Cultural connections. And the people were content. Many of them were so content that when the first order came, they didn't think much of it. It was clear, it was definitive. And for many of them, it made sense. The king had requested that all mirrors be removed from the kingdom. And it came with an explanation. Because mirrors have a way of getting people to focus on flaws. And that wasn't the type of thing that was wanted for a prosperous kingdom. Been in this shape for a little while, so now's a really good time to think about the impact here. Are you safe, comfortable, in the most beneficial shape for you? Are you able to freely breathe and control your respiration rate? We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds on this first side. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our right knee back to neutral, bent position, left knee back to a neutral bent position. Release your left arm into a externally rotated cactus position. And let your body kind of unwind the ask that was just put upon it. Think about the entirety of that posterior shoulder girdle and how the weight balance is playing out across it, left to right, right to left. Think about how your head and cervical spine are sitting, and if the asymmetry of the shoulder openness, internal to external, has caused a shift there, and see if you can rebalance. And then when you're ready, let's take our prop, blanket prop, and put that over on side two, the left side. We'll let the right hand 90-degree bend of the elbow point up towards the ceiling, and then let that fall towards internal rotation. Remember that if you don't feel like you have the space, you can prop the hand up on the ball, or if that's not working, you can lower that elbow down towards your hips until you feel like you have the space. If you feel like you have tons of space, we can tuck that hand underneath our body, and then we will allow the left knee to fall out wide. Right leg can extend, and we make a determination whether that blanket is the appropriate thing for the left thigh or not. Most important aspect here is that we are in the most impactful and beneficial shape for our body. External rotation of the left hip, internal rotation of the right shoulder, external rotation of the left shoulder with that palm up, and then a neutral alignment of the right hip, toes pointed towards the ceiling. Easy, fluid breath here. Thinking about how the shape is impacting your ability to breathe, but also how your conscious awareness, control of your breath is allowing you to be more and more at ease in the shape. And so this kingdom had always prided itself on its culture, its art, thoughtfulness. Didn't have too much of a problem getting rid of the mirrors. Not focusing on flaws that they would see in a mirror seemed like a pretty decent idea. And so one by one, mirrors were removed from homes, from businesses. Taken down to the kingdom castle itself and exchanged for bread, silver. Had a menu of choices. Last 15 seconds here on the second side. And as it feels appropriate for you, bring our left knee back up to neutral, our right knee to that neutral bent position. Unwind your right arm, cactus, and settle here. Think about the space across the entirety of that posterior of your shoulder girdle. From the bottom of the scapula to the top of the shoulder shelf. Think about the balance of weight distribution between that top and bottom and between the left and right side. When your body feels balanced left to right, top of the shoulder girdle to bottom of the shoulder girdle, let's engage with our ball. The ball here, we are going to move slowly with our breath, but we are also going to be actively focused on a very high density area of musculature. So we are looking for a glute med connection to the sacrum. So we're just off the bony structure. So just to the left of the sacrum, the bone, the kind of triangular shape of the bone structure, and into that big meaty section of tissue there. And so as you set your ball, remember that you have the ability to control the density or the intensity by bridging. So knees are bent. You can release yourself into that ball as much or as little as feels accessible. We really are looking for the kind of big triangulation of musculature at this attachment site, though. So sensation is kind of the easiest way to find that, right? The generally, not always, but generally, the area where we're going to find and feel the most sensation is kind of the spot that we're looking for here. And then no matter if you've released your weight completely or if you're bridging, we're going to start a little conscious lateral movement of that left leg. Now, conscious is how I'm describing it because the breadth of your movement is going to be completely determined by what is the maximum benefit for you. So if full singular bilateral butterfly is the right thing, wonderful. If it is just the subtlest lateral sway, also wonderful. We have already been in full external rotation, so we should have that capacity to move, but that doesn't mean that it's providing the maximum benefit. We're looking for a direct line of communication to that musculature so that it can tell us what will offer the most benefit. With the goal here being that by releasing this pinch point, this bunch point of musculature, we can create and craft space for the entirety of the posterior chain, as well as the lower half, the medial chain. Give ourselves about 40 more seconds just to explore this first side. Maybe worth reminding you that this is a restorative class, right? So if we are in so much depth that we are stressing our body, we're probably a little bit too intense. We want to be able to consciously move and use our breath to impact creating and crafting space. When it feels appropriate, the knees come back to neutral. We lift ourselves high enough to relieve ball pressure and then release the hips back down and feel into the asymmetry. Note how the right side of the QL musculature sits. Note how the pelvic bowl sits. Note how the left side of the QL musculature sits as well. But just note where we've impacted and where we haven't yet impacted. And eventually we'll take our ball and find that mirrored position on side two. So we are looking again to find the triangulation of big musculature sheaths just to the lateral edge of the sacrum. So we're off the bony structure and into the musculature that really says, it really greets you when you connect with it, right? It lets you know that it's there. And then once you find that, once you feel the depth that is appropriate for you, then we start a little movement. We start to explore our body's ability to externally rotate while we have this tacked down triangulation of musculature. We feel how that impacts, how it allows us to create space. So one by one, the mirrors of the kingdom disappear. And sure enough, people stop worrying so much about their little flaws, their imperfections. Thinking about how that movement is impacting your ability to create space. About 40 more seconds here on this second side. Eventually, when it feels appropriate for you, we bring that right knee back towards a neutral alignment. alleviate enough pressure that we can remove the ball. And let's just relax for a moment so that you can feel the entirety of the posterior chain. Think about the space you've created on the back side of your body, how that is allowing your body to interact differently with the mat beneath you. And we are going to take both our ball and our blanket, and blanket can stay in hot dog fold. Uh, we are taking the ball and just placing it in the middle of that hot dog fold so that we end up with a ball protected by the blanket, and that's going to come underneath the cervical spine. I just really, over the last year, have fallen in love with this. So, ball comes into the middle of the cervical spine. Ball can come at the lower, at the base of the cervical spine, or at the top of the cervical spine. The thing that I love so much about this, and I will continue to say, is that when we use the ball and the blanket in unison, the ball can't run away. So we end up with this really impactful adjustment on our cervical spine. Legs here have some options. You can keep them bent, you can extend them, you can bring the bottoms of the feet together if you want for to explore some more external rotation, although we've been there quite a bit. The key here is the conscious time we take to shape and reinforce the articulation, the extension articulation of the cervical spine. We spend more and more time looking down at our phone, looking down at our screens. We spend more and more time in a flexion shape, allowing the spine to rebalance in this extension shape. Is an essential thing that we can do for our spinal health. Make sure you're not taking the extension of the cervical spine and forcing that to change the shape of either your lumbar or your thoracic spine. So we're pulling slack out of the system again. We want to make sure that in doing so, we are expanding the musculature around the cervical spine without allowing compression of compensatory compression elsewhere. And so, with less and less thought, of oneself, of the flaws, of the imperfections, with the abolishment of reflection, people become less reflective, not just in their visual sense, but in their thought processes themselves. The less reflective people are, the less expressive they are in their arts, in their public discourse, in their engagement. Note how your capacity to breathe may be being impacted. We take slack out of the system. Is the throat feeling restrictive? And if it is, can we become more and more at ease so that the breath can be more and more fluid? We'll give ourselves about 40 more seconds here. And as you're ready, in a similar way to how we moved our hips with the ball's pressure, we're going to start to add a little lateral sway to the head, to the chin. The breadth of rotation, again, completely dictated by what feels maximally beneficial. Thinking about where you're creating space and how that space is determined by your movement. Let's just give ourselves 40 more seconds here to dynamically explore this upper posterior chain and structure expansion. And when it feels right, coming back to neutral, making a determination if you'd like to keep the head in an active position, the neck in an active position, or if you'd like to remove the prop, and bringing your knees back to neutral if they're not already there. So bent knee position, bottoms of the feet, kind of actively engaged in the mat so you really feel the anchoring at the sacrum, and then let's add some lateral sway from the knees. really thinking about as you get into these dynamic rotations, what is giving you the maximum impact capacity. Next time the knees fall over to the left, let's let them settle there. Won't be a long static hold, but enough to just feel what you have here. To breathe into what you have here. And then we'll bring our knees back to neutral and let them fall over to the second side, the right side. Once again, just really thinking about the ability, the opportunity to explore what you have available here. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Relax once again. Ask yourself if there's anything that you might want that you could possibly benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer that to ourselves now. If we have everything that we want, everything that we could need, let's settle into that. When you're ready for some stillness, let's find our way into a shape where we can fully and deeply appreciate Shavasana. On those spaces where the debates began to fade into silence, where the self awareness continued to be dialed down, where the people started to ask less and less questions. Art became more and more uniform, and voices became more and more echoes of one another. And this was the kingdom when a traveler arrived, finding your complete and full version of stillness here. This traveler watched for a few days, as everyone he saw in the kingdom seemed to kind of just be going through the motions in this dull, thoughtless state. He picked up this broken piece of glass and this scrap of tinfoil, and he began pressing the tinfoil into the glass, polishing and polishing and polishing, until a reflection was available. And he'd walk through these towns and villages and he'd show people their reflection. And they'd almost always say the same thing. Is that really what I look like now? Well, they're a little bit more disheveled, maybe, than they had been. But his response was always the same. So it's not your appearance that's changed, it's your mind. And each one of those conversations started to spread a realization through these communities. People started to realize that the absence of mirrors had changed them, but it was a loss of introspection, not a loss of the ability to see oneself. That was the most impactful. Let's start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes, into our wrists and our ankles, our shoulders and our hips, neck, head, elbows, knees. The entirety of the body moves and explores. And eventually we allow that movement to help us find our way back into a seat. Let's let our spine get tall, breath get fluid, eyes close. And we'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, you remind yourself, when we become weary of reflection, it is often not that we're worried of what we might see, but what we might realize we can no longer ignore. And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you recharging with me this morning, taking care of yourselves. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move. Have a beautiful day if I see you tomorrow. If not, have a beautiful week. I'll see you next week. Love you. Mwah.